This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, John Ryder back again with episode 75 of a Geek Leader podcast. And today on the show, we've got Gary Hayslip, the Chief Information Security Officer at Webroot. And if you aren't familiar with Webroot, they make some antivirus and malware protection software as well as other security products. Really great company. And talking to Gary was a fantastic conversation about security and about the things that you need to do if you're interested in a career in security, if you're interested in leadership of being a CIO or CISO or anything like that. He talks about how his military career kind of led him into this process. Overall, it's a great interview, so give it up for Gary Hayslip.
My story actually is kind of typical of a lot of my peers. I come from the military, and I had done 20 plus years in the Navy. And while I was in the military, I was actually working with electronics and IT, and became fascinated with cybersecurity. And when I was on deployment, I was reading books on it. When I got home, I basically built a lab in my garage and started learning how to hack, paid for my own certifications. Went ahead and changed my degree from a double E degree to, a degree in IT, because I just decided, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to work in. And this is like, in the late 90s, when I was making all these decisions. And, who knew, 20 years later, it was going to be that was a really good decision that I made. But the reason I say it's similar to a lot of my peers is that many of us, who come from the military or come from that type of a background, we tend to have, started, like myself, I was doing software development, and then I was a network engineer for a while, and then I was a network architect. I was building out network operation centers and doing a lot of the stuff while I was in the military. I've been a CIO, I've been a CISO, I've been a chief privacy officer. I've done a little bit of everything, and so you have a pretty extensive, pretty wide, varied background, just because coming from a military and a government background like myself, you just don't do one job. They tend to give you multiple hats to wear, and you get used to it. It doesn't bother me none. I mean, I can I can hold multiple positions and just go on about my business. I got a job to do. I got teams to manage. I got people to mentor and train, and and it's just part of the job. It's just part of the mission. You don't think about it. But like I said, you run into a lot of us who've been in cyber for a while. We come from backgrounds like that, where we tend to have started in IT, and over time, as we were in IT, we got into audit, we got into forensics, and before you know it, we're in security. And then we're running teams, and in the process of managing teams and helping build out a security program, sooner or later, somebody says, hey, you're running the security team here and you're writing policies and stuff. We're going to start this new position called Chief Information Security Officer, and tag you're it. And so, and a lot of times that's how a lot of us, kind of get our first job. Typically, it's being a director. A director of security, or a senior security manager, where you're managing a team, and then it just it grows from there. And so it's one of the things that I tend to tell when I talk with a lot of students that want to be a CISO. I tell them, I said, okay, but understand you're looking at a 10-year process easily.
Yeah, it's definitely a winding road. I know I've had a similar background as far as working in infrastructure as well as software development, kind of coming from both areas, and I found that's been very helpful for me. How do you think that helps out when it comes to cybersecurity?
I actually recommend to to people that are doing they're looking at cybersecurity, and they're saying, well, what search should I work on first? And I tell them right away, if you're the first one you should probably do is Network Plus and then do Security Plus. And the reason why I recommend Network Plus is that you need to understand how networks are put together. You need to understand how data flows in networks, ports, protocols, a lot of the basic stuff, because, your mission when you start working in security is to protect that, is to protect those types of assets and the data that's in those assets. And, to be able to do that effectively, you need to understand how they're built, not just on premise and data centers, but also in the cloud. And so I recommend, hey, do Network Plus, then do Security Plus, so you get the basics in security. And then, if you got time, do a CCNA, so you get some really in-depth, knowledge about how networks are built and engineered. And then possibly do an AWS cert, just so that you have a cloud cert, so you understand some fundamentals about how cloud infrastructures are put together and how data is stored and manipulated and used in cloud environments.
Yeah, so that's kind of hitting all the different areas, and not just focusing solely on security, but the things that security impacts.
Yeah. But the thing about it is that, I think, to do the job well, you need that background. Just so you can, like for me as a CISO working at Webroot, I just don't do internal security where I'm just, hey, all right, I got AV, check. I got firewalls, check. Okay, we're doing patch management, check. I'm not doing just the basic stuff. I spend a lot of my time talking to my dev teams and my engineering teams, talking to HR, talking to legal. We have a lot of different, compliance regimes like PCI and GDPR, that we have to manage. We're ISO 27001 certified, so I have to look at those types of security controls and how they're wrapped around data privacy and data security. And many of those things go beyond just a checkbox. And so you have to have some experience about how, not just how networks are built, but how networks are used. So that when you're talking to, the business intelligence team and, they're buying a SaaS solution that they're going to go ahead and tie into the network, and they're going to be going ahead and loading it with specific data sets, you can already start running through your head, this whole risk management checklist of things that are running through your head. Okay, we've got this. Okay, we got these controls in place to protect that. You start running these things through your head because you understand how they're put together, how they're built. And you spent time, with these different departments, and you understand how they work, what their jobs are, what they do for the business, and so in cyber, it's all about risk.
So having that business knowledge, I know for me, my primary job is an IT director, and when we get into security, it's like we have to balance this convenience versus security.
Yeah.
How do you do that effectively and communicate with the business that you're doing this for, the better, the higher good, I guess you would say?
In fact, we've had these discussions. I was talking to, being part of the C-suite here at Webroot, I was talking to some of my peers, some of my fellow VPs, and I said, I can make a computer really, really secure, but it's not going to be very usable when I get done. But by God, it's secure. Nobody's getting in that puppy, but you're not going to really be able to use it for very much, So you got to get this, it is that balance between usability of an asset and the security of that asset and the risk in between. How much of that risk is the business willing to accept? I mentor not just, my own teams and everything. I also mentor and work with a lot of my peers, with a lot of other fellow CISOs. And, some of the junior CISOs I've talked to, I explain to them that, your job is not to own your organization's risk. Your job is just to make it visible and then help the business make decisions on how they're going to manage it. And so a lot of what we do is, and that's why I explain to them, be comfortable with risk management frameworks like CIS 20 or ISO 27001 or NIST, 800 TAC 53 or the NIST, cybersecurity framework. Those frameworks give you an approach to identifying risk, and then, the results of that framework, once you're done going through an assessment, you then take that kind of give you an idea how you would do it practically. You're new to an organization. You're a CISO. You've showed up. You're new to an organization. You think you've got a pretty good idea how deep the rabbit hole goes, but you need to better understand the company's risk so you can help them and speak to it. Typically, I would recommend you start with CIS 20 first. The reason is it's more of a basic risk management, framework methodology. It's easy to use, and what in my rule of thumb is I start with that. It's got 20 main controls with some sub controls to it. I start going through that that checklist, and as I'm reviewing it and I'm talking to my peers, my various business units here, and I'm talking with my security team and understanding the different services and the different things that we provide to the business. I'm checking things off. Okay, we're doing this. We're not doing this very well. Okay, yeah, we're doing this really good. When I get done, if I score about a 70% or better on the CIS 20, then I know the organization, from a risk management perspective, we're mature enough to look at a more in-depth risk management framework. So then I might jump to NIST or I might jump to ISO. Here at Webroot, we do ISO because we're international. We're over in the EU and we're over in Asia, and so we're ISO 27001. And so, taking that more in-depth framework, you start going into the controls and you start documenting what you're doing and what you need to work on. When you get done, you're going to have a whole list of gaps. You're going to have a whole list of issues that you're not doing, or you're going to have a whole list of issues that you're in the beginning stages of it, but you need to work on it. Once you have that list of issues, as a CISO, as a security leader, it's stupid to go running around with that list and start screaming the sky is falling, because nobody wants to listen to you. Mm-hmm. And instead, your best bet is you brief the executive staff that you're doing this assessment, and then once you have the findings, you get together, your peers. Like for me, I'd get together the other VPs in the different business units, and I'd show them what I found. Hey, all of you guys provided this different information. We answered about 800 plus questions. Here's our baseline right now of what I'm looking at. We're at this level. Here's a list of all these different issues that we need to work on. I need you to help me prioritize them. And so, because what I need to understand is I may have found these different security gaps, but I may not understand in the process of remediating them, what's the impact to the business? What's the impact to the revenue generating operations that are going on? And so I need to talk with my peers, my stakeholders, and have them help me rack and stack these things.
Yeah, and then once does that kind of help you figure out what risks are acceptable to have within the business?
Yeah.
And
oh yeah,
okay.
What you end up doing is when you prioritize them, one, you start getting buy-in from your other, from your stakeholders, because they're involved. And now security isn't back there in the back room in the closet. Security is extremely visible. It's out here, and they're part of the process.
Gotcha.
And at the same time, I'm talking to the CIO, and we're looking at these things because I'm going to have to work with the CIO and their teams, because their teams are going to have to work with my teams to implement or make changes to a lot of things. And so we're going to go ahead and prioritize this list. And then I know from a reality standpoint, this list really is going to turn into a strategic plan, and it's probably going to be spread over a couple of years, because there's only so much change an organization and its culture can handle at any one time. And so you break it up. You take the high level ones first that have the large amount of risk, and you kind of focus on those first. You brief the executive team so they can see what you want to do. Hey, I've got a 3-year plan. Here's the issues that we found from our assessment. Here's our baseline. And, we're going to work on this first set of issues. And then next year, we're going to reassess and see where we're at. And we should see a level of maturity. We should see a reduction in risk, and we also should, adjust our strategic plan, because, things will change. And, and that's what I'm doing here at Webroot. And I've found doing that, they're a lot more engaged with my teams. Because at the same time, I've told my teams, I said, these security gaps that we find, these projects that we're going to be doing, we own them. You just don't throw them to IT and then complain that IT isn't doing their job. No, we own them. IT may come in and augment us and help us with specific things. We need to spin up a server, or we need to go ahead and configure a switch because we're installing a new piece of equipment. And some of our technologies we may share, with some of the teams, like the network team or the systems team. But the thing about it is we own our projects. You do not give those away. You're responsible for them. And it's been a totally different world in the 18 months that I've been here at Webroot, because it's been unique. And then I came in and I've made all this visible. We've gotten buy-in. People are excited. The security committee is being briefed on what we're putting together, and I'm taking feedback from them, changes that we need to make. My team is having to get used to customer service. They got to go talk to people. We're actually putting together, as we're standing up ServiceNow to handle all of our tickets, I'm actually looking to put together a survey, because as we close out tickets and we're working different issues, I want us to be able to send a follow-on survey to see how well we did and what can we improve to do better.
Yeah, I think that customer service thing is one of the things that I know I've been at the role I'm at now for a little over 2 years, and when I started out, that was the first thing that I wanted to tackle. Is I wanted to have a department that was customer focused, that weren't necessarily just order takers, but had a seat at the table, were invested in what the business was doing, and listened to them and offered solutions, not just tried to check the boxes.
Well, and I hate at times where, like IT and cybersecurity, they tend to look at employees as just users. Mm-hmm. Those stupid users are causing all these problems. And of course I was telling my team, I said, you understand if we didn't have stupid users, we wouldn't have a job.
Exactly.
And they're all kind of looking at me. I said, so think about that. They're our customers. And the happier customers we have, the more funding we get for projects and training and different things that we want to do. You might want to think about that. Mm-hmm. And so it's totally, changed our mindset, and for me, it's the way I approach cybersecurity now is more aligned towards the business. When I was doing my master's, I decided to do an MBA, and I worked extensively with a lot of startups, and I really started getting a focus on business and how technology is intertwined in business and how it's used and the different issues and decisions that businesses make. And at the time, I was doing it when I was at, when I was still with the federal government. I was in the civil service at the time, and I was doing it so I could better understand how to align my different teams that I had, my security and my network, my data privacy teams, with the organization, and how we could go ahead and support the 40 different departments, that the Navy command that I was at, had at the time. But the more I got into it, I started seeing so many different things that I could change, my view on cybersecurity. And what I found is a lot of my peers that I work with, a lot of other CISOs that I work with who've done MBAs, are aligned very similar to my approach, and that, cyber is there to augment and to support the business. And, I kind of look at cybersecurity as an enterprise risk management service. That's what we provide, and depending on if we're talking to a department and they're doing a project and we're just there to give risk management advice that, hey, this solution you're looking at, you're going to have some issues because our switches can't handle this. So we're going to need to go ahead and make some changes to the project and do this, or we're full on, we own half the project because we're going to use whatever technology is in place, like ServiceNow. We're going to be using it along with systems and IT and all these other different teams.
So what are some of the skills that do you think are necessary for a CISO to have, like the leadership and soft skills? What do you think are most important or necessary that technical folks coming up and like your students you talked about, you talked to earlier, that they don't learn in school that they need to have? What are some of those skills?
Some of the soft skills I talk about are One, you definitely have to be patient because things aren't going to happen all at once. There's times where you may have an issue or a problem that you're trying to solve, and you can't handle. It's too big of an issue, so you're going to have to break it down in pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to have to go ahead, and once you break it down into pieces, then you start, solving those little pieces. Well, that takes time. So, you've got to have patience. You got to be good at time management. Yeah. You got to be tenacious in the fact that, tenacity. You're going to get knocked down. You're going to screw things up. You're going to make mistakes. Whether it's in IT or whether it's in security, people make mistakes. People blow things up. It just happens. The difference, though, and I sit there and I tell my team members, I'm like, I'm not going to eat you up just because you've blown something up, you've broken something. I'm expecting you to learn from it. You're going to come back and tell me, okay, what did I learn? Here's my workaround. This is what we're going to do to fix it. That's what I'm looking for you to go ahead and do. So you've got to have that. I tell a lot of students I talk to that you cannot look at security, you cannot look at IT as it's a 9 to 5 thing. I come in, 5 o'clock, I leave for the day. I'm just sit in my cubby and do my thing. That's not security. Security is running 24/7. Mm-hmm. Security is intertwined in pretty much everything the business is doing. And, you'll be on call. You'll be working in teams. So you have to be comfortable working in teams, doing teamwork. You have to be dependable. There's a lot of times as you're working in a team, each of you has specific deliverables. And your teammates are expecting you to do your piece. Mm-hmm. Some of the soft skills I tell them is that you got to take a shower occasionally.
Yeah.
Working close together and stuff like that. Think about your people skills. You have to talk to each other. You have to be able to communicate with each other beyond a text message. You have to be able to communicate effectively, beyond just writing an email. It doesn't do you any good if you discover the answer to a major issue that's been affecting the business, and you figured out a way to be able to save them major, revenue, but you can't communicate it. And so these are a lot of things that I kind of, I talk to them a lot about. As a CISO, some of the big things I look at is, teamwork. I have to work with my peers, and a lot of my peers are not technology, focused. Mm-hmm. And so I have to be patient with them. I have to be able to break technology down and relate it to a business aspect that they're able to understand. So that's major communications there. I have to be able to, make my case if I'm, fighting for funds or if I'm, fighting for a specific view on a project or something that we need to do. Be willing to collaborate. One of the biggest things you'll learn is our field moves so fast, you will never learn everything.
You're absolutely right. That's one of the things I tell my students. I teach part-time at Winthrop University, and I'll tell my students when they come in there, I was like, the things that we learn, that you're learning in school, in the computer science department, will likely be out of date by the time you graduate. So focus on learning how to learn and focus on how to stay on top of the changing technologies that are there, and get excited about learning and get excited about the changes that are there. Don't just say, well, I learned this my junior year and this is what I'm going to stick to my whole career.
I sit there and when I'm, talking to students or, I spend a lot of time working with vets who are transitioning, out of the military and they want to come into cyber. And I explained to them, I said, understand this is a field that you will be continuously learning. And if you do not put in that time to keep yourself up to date, to be reading blogs, to work on certifications, to constantly be doing training, you're going to fall behind, and you'll fall behind quickly. Yeah. And there's no excuses because there's so much free training and different things that are available out there that, I sit there and I tell people, I said, if you're going to make this a career, just understand that. You're always going to be doing some type of training and educating yourself on something because this field changes extremely fast. So just feel comfortable with that, and that's the reason why I think it's really important that you have to find this field fascinating and be curious and enjoy technology because you're going to be doing a lot of stuff with it.
Yeah, I think being curious is a super key point, and you hit on it. I think being comfortable with change, being comfortable, I guess, being uncomfortable. Being comfortable that things are going to be different. Yeah. I think that's a really good one. So, what advice would you have to someone? Let's say they're a development manager or an engineer, but they're not really that interested in cybersecurity. Like they don't want to go into the CISO role, but they know that there's a part of that they need to have. What advice would you have for them about focusing on cybersecurity if they're just writing code or just managing servers or something?
I mean, if they were just doing something like that and they just wanted to improve some of their security knowledge, I would say probably look at, like, say, the Security Plus certification. Mm-hmm. It would give them some baseline knowledge on some of the security stuff that the security team's running around yelling about. You'll kind of understand, okay, hey, this is from a frame of reference. This is where these guys are coming from. They're following these best practices, or they're following these frameworks that are mandated by a specific, compliance regime like HIPAA or PCI or NIST, whatever the company is following. But with that said, I mean, I've known a lot of people that were in development that decided, hey, I want to do something different. And so they get into networks, and then they end up getting into security just because they kind of fall into it. Yeah. And what's interesting is, I mean, I spend a lot of time working with my teams, and I mean, right now we're hiring, for a mid-level security analyst position at our headquarters in Denver. And one of the things that, the candidates that we're interviewing right now, I'm asking is that they have experience with scripting, because and that's one of the things that, in fact, I'm actually training my staff on how to script with Python and everything, because we, some of the newer methodologies and technologies in security, if you're building out adaptive security platforms where you're trying to go ahead and automate the response of security technologies based off of, threat feeds and data coming from your sensors, so that, it isn't manually your team having to go look things up. Instead, you want to automate some of the responses and start building orchestration into, your security platform. You're going to have to script that. You're going to have to tie things together. And Python is kind of like cybersecurity glue, where you kind of tie, a lot of the different technologies together as you start building out a security platform. So you want to build something that's adaptive, that's flexible, that you can change technologies out that will share different data feeds and different types of threat feeds. And so I look for now when I'm building teams and I'm hiring people that have some dev experience, that are comfortable, with scripting and doing and that are comfortable with programming languages. I look for people that for continuous education. Hey, I may have done some certs back in 2016, but I haven't done anything since. Well, why? If this is a career that you're looking at doing, why haven't you gone up on Udemy, or why haven't you gone ahead and gone up on, on Pluralsight and done some classes and worked on some stuff? Why haven't you done some classes, at the local, college or whatever, to continue your education? Those kind of people I'm looking for. Yep. Those kind of people that build things at home and that are constantly playing with stuff and breaking things, that go to DEF CON, that go to capture the flags, that what I'm saying? Because that kind of curiosity, that kind of thirst for different knowledge that add the skill sets and that grow, your level of knowledge and everything, those are the people that are going to be team leads. Those are the people that are going to be directors, because they start having, because their knowledge is a lot wider. Their frame of reference of how the security program and how the IT program fits within an organization and actually provides value to the business, they see that, and they can see the connections, and they can see how the different technologies that are being purchased and that are being implemented and everything, they got that level of skills and experience to tie these things together.
No, I think you hit on it absolutely right. They're the ones that are interested in and are curious and are moving out there. I had a student of mine. He came up to me, and this is before I actually taught him. He just came to my office hours and said, "Hey, I saw that there's a job posting for the company you work at, and I wanted to see what I needed to do to get an interview." And I was like, well, for starters, he handed me his resume, he brought it with him. He was very, go-getter. And I looked at it and I said, well, here are the languages that I'm working at this company. It was a mobile and web development group. And I kind of listed out the things that I was looking for. And I said, you don't have that experience. So go back and get that experience and come back to me if you're interested. And kind of dismissed him, thinking I'd probably never see this guy again. And about 3 months went by, and we posted another position for similar job description. And he showed back up at my office hours back at Winthrop and said, I know you said that you needed these skills. Here are the certificates from lynda.com and from Pluralsight where I went through these trainings and I did these things. Can I get an interview now? And I was like, that's the kind of guy I want, Yeah. And a person that's willing to do the work and willing to learn on their own just to get that opportunity. And I think those are great skills to have.
Yeah, I can tell you, like for me, back in 2000, 2001, I was still active duty military, but I knew I wanted to work in the IT field. I wanted to work in the security field. And so I'd go up on the job sites and I'd pull down the job descriptions that people were being hired for. And I would look at, okay, what technologies do they have to have? What skill sets do they have to have? And then I'd bounce it off of what I had, and I'd make a list of things that I needed to work on. And then I'd start looking at local colleges in the area. And that's how I found a college that had a full-on Cisco lab, and the state paid for my CCNA and everything. I didn't have to pay for anything, and it was doing that kind of research. And I just said, okay, these are the things that I'm lacking in if I ever wanted to be a senior network architect. And I started actually building out this roadmap and, with the different certs and the different experiences along this roadmap. And I started checking them off, and I knew, okay, it's going to take time. All right, I've got time. And I just broke it down, and I actually, that whole experience of doing that, I actually turned that into a series of articles that I put up on my LinkedIn profile. But yeah, and that's what I'm saying. And I look for people that do that, that they're realistic, that this is a career field that they want to work in. They want to be here for the long haul, and they're breaking down what they need to do, and they're doing it.
Yeah, and I'm going to link to those articles in the show notes as well, because I've read a few of those, and they're really good. And that kind of brings me to my next thing. I know you wrote a couple of books about the CISO Desk Reference Guide. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, myself and my two co-authors, we wrote the CISO Desk Reference Guide Volume 1 and Volume 2. And both books are actually different. Each book has 9 chapters. So we cover about 18 chapters of different, topics. And the way it's written is, like we have a chapter on, enterprise risk management, on like third-party risk. Mm-hmm. And when you start that chapter, there may be like 4 questions that we're going to address. And so at the beginning of the chapter, my two co-authors, they would write their view on how they would go ahead and how they would do those questions, how they would do it as a CISO, and then I would write how I would do it. And so by the end of the chapter, you get 3 different views from 3 different CISOs. So when you read a chapter, it's like you've had 3 different conversations from 3 different types of CISOs on how you would do something like incident response, or how you would recruit and build a security team, or how you would write a strategic plan, or how you would use cyber insurance, And so, as you read each chapter, not only do you get these unique viewpoints from 3 different CISOs, we also give you 5 takeaways at the end of each chapter that you can immediately do for yourself or your security team. And so the books were written for people that are going to be a CISO, people that are getting into their first security leadership role, and they're trying to figure out, hey, what policies do I write, or how do I build a security program, or how do I do these things? That's what these books are written for. And so the first book is more the beginning stage of getting you up and running as a CISO, as a security manager. And then the second book is more in depth, where we'll go into how do you build out an incident response team, or how do you recruit and manage your teams, or how do you stand up a forensics team. And we're planning on writing, in fact, we've got 8 other projects, in the works that we're, so you'll be seeing more stuff coming out underneath the CISO Desk Reference, label.
Yeah, there's another audience too that you can target, because I've looked through these, and what's interesting for me is being an IT director at a smaller company where we can't afford to have a CISO. These things give me the framework that will help me implement these things without having that role.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in fact, we've had, it's interesting, we've had security companies, and we've had different, companies buy like a case of them and give them to their board of directors. So their board, would understand, okay, oh, this is what the CISO role is. This is what they do. This is how they support an organization. We've had vendors buy them and give them to customers. It's been really interesting. I mean, like I said, we just published volume 2 in April, and it's out and selling really, really well. And it's both volume 1 and volume 2. They're on Amazon, or you can buy them in an ebook version if you want to read it on your Kindle. Volume 1 is in about 15 different countries. It's actually being translated into Mandarin right now. So it's over in China. I mean, I said, both of them are doing extremely well. And, and it's interesting. I mean, I go to RSA or I go to Black Hat or DEF CON, and I run into people from all over the planet, who've read the books and have used them to prepare for they're preparing for their job interview, and they're reading through the book and taking notes and remembering some things that, just before they go in for the interview. And I can't count the number of times I've run into people. Hey, can I buy you a beer? I just got hired, and I did, or I was reading your articles up on LinkedIn, and, I used this article to do this, and I really like how you're talking about. And it's cool. I mean, and that's what we wrote them for. I mean, we wrote them because we see so many people coming into the community, coming into the cybersecurity field, and we wrote these as guides to give people a path so they could see, how to get to being a CISO and what you do once you're there.
That's awesome. And I'll definitely link to those in the show notes as well. Is there any other way that people can contact you if they have any questions or want to find out more about the things that you're working on?
I typically just go ahead and say you can either contact me on Twitter, at Hayslip, or you can contact me on LinkedIn. I mean, I use both of them as my platforms, and I talk with people all the time.
Okay, I'll link those up for sure. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate having you on.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. I said thanks for asking, and if there's anything else I can help with, or if you need anything, please let me know.
All right, will do.